The story unfolds in 2002 as a dysfunctional family drives through the night with a screaming baby in the backseat. It becomes evident that the mother's just confronted the father's secret girlfriend, and she makes it clear that she's over the drama. Tensions escalate when she grabs the wheel, attempting to kill the entire family. However, they end up crashing into a parked car, and only the father ends up losing his life. Fast forward 17 years, and we're introduced to Megan, Kathy, and Stacy, who are celebrating Kathy's promotion to principal of her esteemed school. Downstairs, we meet Ian, who's the new handyman for the hotel, and he responds to the air conditioning problem that Kathy and her friends are experiencing in their room. As the trio discusses Kathy's separation, they try to persuade her to join in on their girls' weekend. However, their plans are momentarily disrupted by Ian, who heads off to inspect their air conditioning. Megan subtly hints to Kathy about talking to Ian, but Kathy dismisses the man before the girls make the situation awkward. Later that night, Kathy decides to call it a night and heads to the pool to relax. While there, Ian joins her and they engage in a pleasant little conversation. After introductions, Ian changes into his bathing suit, encouraging Kathy to join him in the water. When Ian dives into the pool's depths, Kathy becomes concerned and jumps in to rescue him. However, Ian quickly reassures her that everything's under control. At this point, Kathy decides to call it a night, but Ian once again persuades her to spend some enjoyable time with him. They share a drink in her room, and as Ian becomes more forward, he kisses her. Kathy feels uneasy, but Ian doesn't slow down, leading to an unexpected romantic night in her room. Unbeknownst to Kathy, Ian has discreetly set up his phone on the nightstand to capture their intimate moments. The following morning, Kathy awakens to find a rose and a note from Ian, expressing that he won't forget their night. When the ladies approach the management to express gratitude for Ian's assistance, he appears unfamiliar with the name they mention. Despite this, they proceed to check out. Meanwhile, Ian is in the alley behind the hotel, meeting the individual he swapped places with, revealing his true motive: to get in touch with Kathy's daughter. When Kathy gets home, we're introduced to her teenage daughter, Bree, who senses a weird change in her mother's behavior. However, Kathy mentions that she's just having a fun time with her friends. On the other side of town, we see Ian, who arrives home in his trailer with his dad. His father, seated on the couch counting pills, blames Ian for being short on product. However, Ian brushes off the accusation and heads to check on his mom in the bedroom. Back at Kathy's house, we learn that Bree has a speech impediment and is anxious about her first day at school. When they arrive, Kathy spots Ian walking up the steps to the school, but immediately dismisses it. She then heads inside and deals with her first day principal duties while Bree attends her first class. There, she quickly realizes that the girls might be a problem for her. Next, the girls decide to befriend Bree, recognizing her as the principal's daughter. Soon after, Ian walks into her class and winds up sitting next to her. Later, while exploring the school's art exhibit, Bree crosses paths with Leslie, Gina, and Steve. Leslie tries to act like she's Bree's new best friend, but Steve questions why Bree speaks so weirdly, not knowing she has a speech impediment. Out of nowhere, Ian steps in to defend Bree's honor, but as Kathy arrives to talk to her daughter, Ian discreetly disappears behind the art. Seizing the opportunity, Leslie and Gina approach Kathy, requesting permission to give Bree a tour, and she happily agrees. Meanwhile, by the lockers, Ian suddenly makes it clear to Steve that no one should ever mess around with Bree. At the local pizza joint, Gina and Leslie discuss Ian's behavior at school, and they don't seem to like how much he was drooling over Bree. In the middle of their conversation, Gina discloses to Leslie that she lost her virginity to Ian, and just then, the man unexpectedly appears at Bree's table. Now, Bree shares a bit of her background with Ian, and in response, he suggests that the two of them should definitely spend some time together alone. As Gina and Leslie come out with pizza, they invite Bree to a party at their house, where Ian will also be present. Returning home, Bree tells her mother she's suspicious about how Leslie and Gina have ulterior motives in their friendship and are only using her. Kathy, however, tries to convince her daughter that perhaps this is a chance for a fresh start in her life and urges her to go with the flow. During the conversation, Bree mentions meeting an attractive guy at school, and Kathy promises to keep an eye out for the guy if he ever misbehaves. As Bree steps away to freshen up, Kathy receives a text from Ian, accompanied by a provocative picture, triggering vivid flashbacks to their previous night together. The following day at school, Bree asks Ian if something had happened between him and Gina, but the man promises that there are no problems at all. Next, we see the two entering their English class. Kathy notices them, but at the same time, Ian stares her down the whole time. Once back in her office, Kathy asks her assistant about Ian, who shares details about his troubled history at other schools. Concerned by this, Kathy decides to reach out to her friend Megan, asking her to come over that night and help her figure out how she'll handle this Ian situation. After school, Bree confronts Ian about his intentions with her, and he skillfully plays the connection card. Meanwhile, inside the school, Kathy glances out her window and spots the two conversing. Swiftly grabbing her purse, she heads over to intervene. Approaching the couple, Kathy informs Bree that they must leave early, although Bree manages to introduce Ian before they go. In the car, Bree asks their mother why Ian acted weirdly around her earlier, but Kathy refrains from sharing overly personal details with her daughter. With this misunderstanding, Bree interprets the situation, thinking Kathy might have heard some gossip about her, leading her to lose a measure of respect for her mother. Back at Ian's home, he checks on his mother and shows her an article about Kathy, asserting that his revenge plan is working perfectly. He also mentions his determination to rescue Bree. In a flashback, we witness the father confessing to cheating on his wife one time, and the gravity of those words once again casts a somber shadow over her eyes. On the other hand, Kathy finds herself caught in the recurring memories of that night with Ian, but a sudden knock on the door interrupts her thoughts. When she opens it, she's met by Bree's father, Ben, who inquires if anything's bothering her. Kathy tries to play it off, like she just had a disagreement with Bree, and to change the mood, she asks Ben if they should tell Bree everything about why they split. After he disagrees and explains how telling her about an affair that happened years ago wouldn't help the situation, Bree comes out and says goodbye to Kathy. Immediately after Bree and her father leave, Megan calls Kathy, insisting on coming over right away. Simultaneously, Ian's parked discreetly in the ditch near Bree's home, patiently waiting for Ben to pass them before suddenly trailing them to an Italian restaurant. Once there, Ben tries to talk to her daughter, but Bree cuts straight to how Kathy was unreasonable about some things. In the middle of their meal, Bree catches sight of Ian, and she leaves Ben to go see him. Meanwhile, Kathy confides in Megan about the complex situation involving Ian, revealing that he's one of her students and is in a relationship with Bree. At the restaurant, as Bree discusses the day with Ian, he attempts to persuade the innocent girl to spend time with him. The more he compliments her, the more Bree falls under his spell. Suddenly, Ben appears from around the corner and Bree introduces the two. Clearly, Ben doesn't seem impressed by this entire ordeal, and the two of them go and finish their dinner. Upon returning to Kathy's house, Ben tells her about how he met a guy named Ian at the restaurant. Immediately, Kathy tells him that keeping Bree away from Ian must be his first priority at this moment, and since he also dislikes the boy, Ben wholeheartedly agrees and he heads out. That night, Kathy wakes up and heads to her garage to grab a knife. Taking a drive to the school, she arrives at Ian's locker, puts in the combination, plants the knife in the locker, and securely closes it. The following day, Kathy gently reminds Bree to avoid Ian at school, and the two of them go their separate ways. During the day, a routine locker check is performed, leading the security guard to discover the knife in Ian's trunk. Despite Ian's attempts to explain his innocence, the security guard brings him to the locker, where Ian shifts the blame onto Kathy, alleging she planted the item to get him in trouble. Now, Kathy takes him to her office and sternly warns him to stay away from Bree or face consequences. In response, Ian says that he's not the only one who will face consequences and warns Kathy to be careful as well. Ian reveals that he got all the information to track her from her social media accounts and also shows her the recorded video from that night. He demands $50,000 by the end of the week, threatening to post the video of their night together. However, Kathy refuses to comply, and instead she ends up expelling him from school. As the guard escorts Ian off the school premises, Gina catches sight of him leaving and chases him in her car. When Kathy tells Bree about expelling Ian from school, it drives the wedge between them even further. Meanwhile, Ian gets back to his trailer, and this time, he's had enough of his stepfather, and he ends up stabbing him in the kitchen before going to check on his mother. When Ian sees her, he promises to protect her and his little sister Bree at any cost. Suddenly, Ian hears Gina entering the house to express her feelings towards him. She confesses her deep love for him, but upon hearing the stepfather grunting on the floor, she quickly makes her exit. Now, Ian insists that she swear to keep this a secret, and he goes back in to deal with the stepfather, resorting to using a baseball bat to deal with the situation. The following day, Kathy attempts to justify herself to Bree on their way to school, but it seems like the justifications aren't enough to make her forgive her. Later, Ian shows up and takes Bree aside, catching Gina's attention. In the auditorium, Ian tries to convince her to skip class with him, emphasizing that he has something important to share. Soon, upon learning of Bree's absence, Kathy inquires with the teacher, and Gina steps out to inform Kathy about Ian taking her earlier. As Kathy steps out, she calls Bree, and Ian speaks on the other end. He tells her that the only way to save Bree is to gather all her money and valuables. After sending Kathy a picture of Bree, Ian takes her on the road and explains what he's hidden from her all this time. Ian reveals to Bree that she is his little sister, and Kathy is the reason that their father's dead. Meanwhile, Kathy rushes to her house and gets Megan to help her gather all the valuables. While Megan suggests involving the police, Kathy hesitates because she doesn't want to take any risks at this point. On the other side of town, Ian leads Bree to an abandoned building. He explains how he'd spent his whole life figuring out how to make Kathy pay. When he reveals that he pleasured Kathy one night, Bree doesn't believe him and attempts to escape. However, Ian swears that he just wants to make Kathy pay, and he continues to search for her. Eventually, Ian ends up cornering Bree, and he calls Kathy to give her the drop-off location. Kathy, accompanied by Megan and the valuables, proceeds to make the exchange. As she goes upstairs to talk to Ian, she discovers he is the child of the man she slept with years ago. This revelation leaves Bree in a state of disbelief. Now, having no other options, Kathy comes clean and apologizes for causing all the pain and misery he had to endure. In a tense moment, Ian pulls out a gun, but in retaliation, he gets pushed out of the barn window. In the next scene, we see ambulances on site, and Bree apologizes to Kathy for causing any trouble due to her naivete. As the two share a warm moment, Ian's lifeless body is being carried away in a body bag. Meanwhile, Ian's mother sits in her trailer waiting for her son, who will never return, and the world continues spinning. A few weeks later, at Bree's birthday celebration, everything returns to normal. Kathy and Ben are mending their marriage, and Bree's relationship with her mother has also found a deeper bond. On top of that, as the movie ends, we see that Bree can finally live a healthy and fulfilling high school life.